Welcome to Resilience Plus RISE, the podcast where resilience is not just a concept, but a lived experience. I'm your host, Scaria, a resilience and accountability coach, a ultra marathoner, and a relentless believer in the human spirit's ability to rise. This podcast, as a companion to my book, Resilience Plus Rise 26.2 Transformative Miles to Unleash Your Marathon of Life Mindset. Each episode is raw, unfiltered, dive into the story of those who have faced life's hardest battles and emerge stronger. Today, the guest I have, it's an honor, it's a privilege to welcome Vanisha Breult. She is a fierce and a passionate keynote speaker. Why? Because she has those experiences. As I mentioned, it's the stories of those who have faced life's hardest battles and emerged stronger. Yes, she is one of those she is one of those personality who has embraced their inner strength to rewrite the narrative. Vanisha's versatility allows her to connect deeply with a diverse audience. She's also known as a social justice warrior and a champion for many. She has come on many platforms, including TV shows across, whether it's in Alberta or in Canada. She's also an author of the Amazon bestseller, Ordinary Courage, One Woman's Story to Overcoming Insurmountable Odds. It's a testament of resilience, human spirit that continues to inspire the readers worldwide. Vanisha, welcome to Resilience Plus Rise, the podcast.
Thank you so much, Thomas. I'm really excited to be here today with you this morning. Eager to dive in.
Dive in. So let's dive in. There is a lot of stories, as I mentioned, is that there were stories where people, as I tell at times, is that you've got choices in life. You can exist through life, or you can live life and say that this is my life. What I believe is that when we talk about your book itself, The Ordinary Courage, there's a lot of chapters in that. So just to make the audience aware, what has been your story so far?
Well, where do you normally have your guests pick up? Like,
You can start from the way it started, when the challenges started coming across and seeing things in a different way, and wherein you stopped and said, "Why me?" And then you turned back and said, "Why not?"
yeah. Well, oh boy, when the trouble started, I guess you could say really in my childhood. I grew up in an alcoholic home. I grew up in a very, I guess you could call it domestic violence. A lot of trials, a lot of tribulations, just a lot of chaos, a lot of trauma. And that, from my very earliest memories as a child, actually, it was just our home was very abusive. And then, at 7, I was sexually abused, and that continued for several years into my early teens. And, some foster care. I was in the foster system, things like that. Struggled with alcohol at an early age, things like that. And then, so it was always, I grew up in that. And mental health. My mom was diagnosed with schizophrenia when I was a young child. So because I was the oldest, a lot of the responsibility fell on me to care for my siblings, to care for my sick mother, just to kind of manage the home up until I left the home. Anyways, so that was that was my background. And I remember I was 18 years old when I first got into a 12-step program. It's when I first addressed my alcoholism, I guess you could say. By the time I was 18, I was walking through the doors of AA. And it even at that time, it was like a do or die situation. If I carried on drinking, it was not going well for me at all. And so, like, I remember being 12 years old, and because of all of the abuse and all of the sexual abuse, I remember running away from home at 12. I was going to actually run away to Vancouver because I figured I might as well just become a prostitute. I just really believed that that was all I was worth. And so such self-worth, very low self-worth. And so then I got into these 12-step programs. I started going to counseling. I remember too, Thomas, like, as much as there was all of that obvious chaos and trauma growing up as a child, there was also this, I don't know, this light in me, or this fight in me, this hope that, there has to be more. This can't be the way that it's supposed to be. I remember just always, as much as I struggled, because I was also suicidal as well as a young child, it was such a fight in me, a fight to live, a fight to survive. But then there was also this force or whatever that kept trying to just take me out too. And anyways, so I had that always in me. And I am a Christian, so I do believe in God and stuff like that. So I believe that it was literally that battle between light and dark, if you will. And then I got married at a young age. My first marriage was abusive, and so I left with my first daughter, left an abusive marriage. And a few years later, I started to build a life for myself as a single mother with my first daughter. And I, went to hairdressing school and things like that, and was building a life for her and myself. And then I met my second husband in church, and thought I had met the man of my dreams. And a couple of years later, we got married. So now I'm 25, and got married, and we went on to have 3 children together. So total, I had 4 children. And we had our struggles in the beginning of our marriage. We were entrepreneurs, self-employed, and so we really went from nothing and built just this incredible life for ourselves and our children. And we're very involved in our church and community and things like that. And we were married for just about 10 years. We were together for about 12. And that was when, I found out in that marriage that he had been molesting my oldest daughter, Carissa, who he had known since she was about 2. Because I first met Peter when she was about 2 years old. And my book, Ordinary Courage, sort of chronicles that part of my life, the marriage and the breakdown, the criminal proceedings, like just everything, because it was almost like, because of where I had come from,
Mm-hmm.
as a child growing up. And I felt like in my second marriage, I felt like I had almost arrived. I had put all of that behind me, all of that past, all of that trauma, all of that abuse. And it was like, and at that stage in my life, I didn't want anyone to know where I had come from, because at that time, even in our world, we didn't talk about alcoholism. We didn't talk about mental health. Those were such taboo subjects. You know what I mean? And you didn't want anyone to know that that's where you came from, because then there was obviously something wrong with you. You know what I mean?
True.
And so I just kind of hid all that. And I loved looking like we had it all together. We had this big, beautiful house. We had arrived. We had a thriving construction company here in Calgary, Alberta. We had 4 children. We were, really connected in our church. And, I was on women's ministry and on the worship team, and we supported the youth programs. And like, we were and just busy raising our family. I was a stay-at-home mom, and just living this life that we worked so hard to achieve, and that I worked so hard to achieve. And then I remember when my daughter came to me, and my oldest daughter came to me and said that she had, because she referred to Peter as daddy, because that she knew him as daddy, even though he was her stepfather, and told me that he had been, daddy had been touching her and things like that. And anyways, I talk about it in the book, because that was when that happened in my life and in my marriage. It was like a tsunami. That's the best way I know how to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a tsunami came and swept out my whole life, our whole life. Nothing would ever be the same again. Nothing was ever the same again to this day. And just trying to rummage through all of that decay. And because, when a tsunami hits, it's messy, it's
Totally.
filthy, things are destroyed, things are ruined, even like everything it's never the same again, And, we went through we pressed charges, we went through our criminal system. And that was the most alone and abandoned and forgotten and discarded that I have ever felt in my life. Our church abandoned us, our church family, and so and there was no support at that time. Now today we have things like, a few years later, like the Sheldon Kennedy Child Advocacy Center
Mm-hmm.
came on the scene, right? And we have, now people are starting to talk about child sexual abuse, and, people in trusted positions of authority, and, coaches and teachers and parents, and these are the people that are molesting our children. So, but when I went through it, there was nothing. I remember scouring the internet and just trying to search for who else has this happened to. Like, just the aloneness was suffocating, not to mention the shame that how could this have happened to my family? How could this have happened to my daughter? Like, and just wishing that, why my daughter? Why my daughter? Why couldn't he have been with other women? Why couldn't he have just cheated? And wishing and praying that, why couldn't he just have been with 100 women? Why my daughter? And then, so just, going through it took about 2 years to go through the criminal justice system. And, looking back at the time, I didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't realize the extent of some of the manipulation, the narcissism, the, call it, emotional abuse and all of that kind of stuff, just that level of domestic violence. And because I still felt like it was my job to protect him at the same time I was trying to protect my daughter and the rest of my children. I still felt like it was somehow my responsibility to cover his reputation, to protect his reputation. And I carried that with me for a long time, for probably the first 2-3 years of that separation and the criminal proceedings. So what that ended up looking like was, the Crown Counsel wanted our victim statements from my daughter, from myself. So we didn't provide those. We didn't provide victim statements. We didn't, things like that. Peter hired the best lawyer that money could possibly buy, the best criminal lawyer. And so he was convicted. He ended up getting 2 years less a day, and he was allowed to serve that sentence out in the community. And, they had the parameters around it and things like that. But yeah, that was a pivotal moment in my life that just changed everything. And it, I started drinking again because I had been sober for years. And then I slowly I started to have like a glass of wine and things like that, just to take the edge off and just to help me sleep a little bit. So I'd have a glass of wine before bed, things like that. That slowly progressed. Really what ended up happening from that moment that everything broke out, and, we filed charges, and then, so we did, for the first 2 years was all the criminal proceedings. I didn't even have space mentally to think about a divorce, to think about anything else. All I had capacity for was just the criminal side of things. I remember the first 4 days of this all just exploding. I don't even remember brushing my teeth. I was on autopilot. I would literally take my clothes off at the end of the day, drop them to the floor, and go to bed. In the morning, I would wake up and literally pick those exact same clothes up off the floor, put them back on, and just go about my day. Because I still had to be mom. I still had to take my kids to school. All my kids were in private school. I still had to get up, take the kids, make lunches, do dinner, just operate still like we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay, and we weren't okay. And so the first 2 years was like that. And then I remember, getting the verdict and everything. But through that whole time of, we're separated, we're living in separate homes. Everything was about, during those 2 years, everything was about Peter. And it's not like the kids and I were victims. It was almost like Peter became the victim, even though he had victimized everyone else. And so I remember going out thinking, I'm reflecting, obviously, I'm praying a lot. I'm trying to think of what my next steps are going to be, things like that. And then I remember being out in Banff, and because I also was a runner, I run. And I remember being out in Banff, and I knew that I needed to make a decision now about my marriage. All of the criminal stuff was done, and I knew I need to figure out what am I doing with my life and this marriage. And I remember going out for this run, and I was lost in my own thoughts and things like that. And I remember all of a sudden in the path, realizing, oh my gosh, I had lost track of where I was running, and I was out somewhere in the wilderness out in Banff, and the path had just kind of given way to, like, the path was now sort of like had disappeared. And I remember standing there in the middle of just this brush and trees and feeling like, holy, like, what should I do? I should probably go back the way I came, try to figure out my way back down into Banff. And right in that moment, I remember feeling like I was literally making that decision about my life and my marriage. I can either go back the way I came from, go back to my marriage, go back to what I know, go back to the life that I had or what was left of it, and try to rebuild it. Or I can move forward. I can go forward. I can take a chance, take a risk, move forward into the unknown. I don't know what is going forward, but I know what I have left behind me. And I knew in that moment, I have to go forward. I have to trust God. I have to trust this feeling, this gut feeling, because I knew I can't go back. I'm going to die if I go back. Maybe not physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I can't do that anymore. And so I literally, metaphorically and physically, in that moment, I made the decision to start running forward. I knew I'm getting a divorce. It's over. I'll never look back again. So I'm running forward on this path. I literally have no idea where I could be running into a bear trap for all I know. I'm running and I'm running. And tears are streaming down my face, because with every step I'm taking, I can just feel like I'm actually breaking free of something. I'm moving into an area in my life that I don't even know if I'm strong enough to do this, but I'm doing it. I'm doing it, and I'm running. And I kid you not, Thomas, I'm probably 5, 6 minutes down the path of me running, I literally break open into the Banff Falls. I come out through this clearing, and I'm right smack in front of the Banff Falls. I didn't even know the Banff Falls were there. You know what I mean? It was the most majestic sight I had ever seen. The mountains, the trees, the sun was literally pouring in through this picturesque view, and the water is like, it was the most incredible. I couldn't believe. And right then I knew I'm going to be okay.
Wonderful.
My kids are going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. I've never lost sight of that moment. Every time I come up against a situation, and I've come up against lots from that time in my life, you know what I mean? I was 37 years old when that happened. I'm now 53 years old, but I have never, every time I come up against something where it's like, I don't know what is moving forward. I don't know what it's good. I remember that. I recall, like, I know what it's like to have to keep moving forward when you don't know what's next, when you're leaving something that's hard or leaving something that's painful, or having to make that decision. Do I go back or do I go forward? I always go forward. I always go forward.
Wonderful.
And so from there, I got the divorce. And from the day I filed the divorce papers, Peter severed the kids and I financially. So we were cut off of everything, all of our resources, all of the money. Like, I had no way of taking care of my family. And so, and then it was 2 years of a long divorce battle. The kids and I slowly, it was like being flushed down the toilet. We just slowly plunged into poverty. And yeah, it just, I don't know how much more of this you want me to get into.
Wow. I was just looking at the time and just realized that we have come to the, but again, there's a statement I usually say time and again, is that out of our deepest of pains comes our deepest of purpose.
Mhm.
And yes, as a runner, I can totally empathize that feeling is that sometimes when you are in a muck and you keep on running, for some reason, whether it is transcendental or whatever it is, I mean, or the gift of the providence, it gives you a clarity. It gives you something that was so unexpected. And then you realize, you know what, I can take it on.
Mhm.
That strength gets on. And so that opened up a new chapter in your life when you went down. I am tempted to go forward, but I would like your permission to stop right over here so that we can. So, Ria, guys, I will be putting out Vanisha's contacts and her information. And if this has stirred you, go ahead and pick up a book from Amazon. It's one of the best bestseller. And also, if you believe you want to connect with her and ask her something further, of course, our conversation will continue in the next podcast. Thank you again, Manisha, for your space and time.